Read the next line, Your Grace." Lady Catherine Armitage's voice carried no farther than the circle around the Duke, yet the words cut through the music as cleanly as a knife through silk. It was the evening of the 18th of May, 1866, and beneath the chandeliers of Carrowden House, London had gathered to celebrate the coming Marden Cup. Crystal light burned over uniforms, white shoulders, black coats, and jewels. The orchestra continued its waltz. Couples turned. Servants moved between the doors with silver trays. Only one small ring of guests near the center of the ballroom had gone still. At its heart stood Nicholas Stanhope, 7th Duke of Carrowden, with his wife's diary open in his hand. Louisa saw the green morocco cover before she sought his face. The brass clasp hung loose. A narrow ribbon marked the page. She had left the book inside the locked escritoire in her private sitting room that afternoon. Now Lady Catherine stood beside Nicholas with the composed satisfaction of a woman who had merely returned a misplaced fan. "Where did you get that?" Louisa asked. Her voice did not rise. Nicholas looked across the circle at her. He was tall, faultlessly dressed, and so accustomed to command that silence often arrived before he requested it. Tonight, amusement already touched his mouth. "My aunt believes I should hear what my wife writes when she thinks herself unobserved. Your aunt has no right to my private room." "Nor I?" he asked. A faint laugh moved through the nearest guests. Louisa felt it like cold air beneath a door. She stood near the terrace windows, where she had spent much of the evening receiving nods from people who spoke past her toward the Duke's racing friends. She was Duchess of Carrowden, yet in Nicholas's circle she had become a pale figure at the edge of his enthusiasms. Astor, the chestnut favorite for the Marden Cup, received more eager questions than she did. Men who would never have dared contradict Nicholas spoke of Louisa's concern for the stables as though it were the fretfulness of a neglected wife. Lady Catherine had encouraged that view with smiles and sighs. "A husband may be entitled to honesty," Louisa said. "He isn't entitled to theft." Nicholas's expression hardened. He had always disliked being corrected before an audience. Lady Catherine lowered her eyes with perfect sorrow. "My dear, no one wished to embarrass you. I found the book where any servant might have carried it away. I thought His Grace should know how deeply the coming race has distressed you." Louisa looked at the clasp. It bore the faint scratch left by the key she used each morning. The lie was polished, but it was still a lie. "Return it," she said. Nicholas glanced at the page. "You wrote of me. I wrote for myself. Then you'll hardly object if your words are innocent." This one, from Lord Fenmore, who had spent the evening praising Astor's shoulders as though discussing a Roman statue. Nicholas smiled at him. It was the quick, bright smile that had made him welcome in every drawing-room from Mayfair to Newmarket. Louisa had once mistaken that ease for warmth. "What does her Grace confess?" Lord Fenmore asked. "That she plans to poison the favorite." "Nothing so dramatic," Nicholas replied. He looked down and read, "Nicholas didn't come to dinner again. I told Mrs. Vale not to hold the soup, because I wouldn't have the servants watch me waiting. I remained at table until the candles smoked. When his place was cleared, I discovered that disappointment has a sound. It's the small scrape of a plate, removed untouched." Nicholas paused, and the circle rewarded him. A woman covered her smile with her fan. Lord Fenmore laughed openly. Someone behind Louisa whispered, "How very tragic." Heat rose beneath her skin, but her hands remained quiet. She remembered that dinner. Nicholas had been at Tattersall's discussing a yearling and had sent no message. She had written the entry because ink had been kinder than speaking into an empty room. Now the loneliness she had hidden for 14 months passed from mouth to mouth as entertainment. Nicholas lifted his gaze. Something flickered in his eyes when he saw that she had not looked away. Perhaps he had expected tears. "Are you satisfied?" she asked. "I've scarcely begun. Then consider what sort of man requires more." The nearest smiles faded. Lady Catherine moved one gloved finger toward the ribbon marking the next page. "Nicholas, she's written repeatedly of the stables. You can't pretend it's ordinary concern." Louisa crossed the floor. The crowd parted because she was a duchess, though no one stepped forward because she was a woman being humiliated. The orchestra faltered, then began another dance. She stopped within arm's reach of Nicholas. The diary remained open between them. "Give it to me," she said. Nicholas's thumb rested along the spine. "Did you enter Asta's box without permission?" "I entered my husband's stable." "Did you question Malcolm Stroud's instructions to the farrier?" "Yes." A murmur ran around them. Sir Malcolm stood behind Lady Catherine, broad across the chest, his silver waistcoat stretched smooth over his stomach. He gave Louisa a look of weary patience. "Her Grace has been unsettled since Marlowe came up lame," he said. "She's formed conclusions without understanding racing plates, training strain, or the ordinary risks of a trial." Louisa turned to him. "I understand the difference between strain and interference." Nicholas closed one side of the diary slightly. "Not enough to surrender it. You might have told me. I tried. You left notes with my secretary. I asked to speak to you." His jaw tightened. "You chose an inconvenient hour. Every hour appeared inconvenient." For one moment the wit left his face. Then Lord Fenmore shifted, and Nicholas seemed to remember the room. The familiar brilliance returned, sharper because it had been challenged. "Let's see whether the diary explains what conversation didn't." He turned back one page. "Perhaps it contains a schedule by which I may become a satisfactory husband." The laughter was louder. Louisa felt the cruelty settle into something colder than pain. She had spent months excusing Nicholas to herself. He was burdened by rank. He had inherited an estate that demanded endless decisions. None of those truths required this choice. She stepped into the center of the circle until no one could pretend she had remained at a safe distance from her own disgrace. "Are you reading my words, Your Grace?" she asked, "or performing them?" Silence came unevenly, first from the women nearest her, then from the men who recognized that a line had been crossed, though they had enjoyed the crossing. Nicholas looked at her over the open book. "If there's a distinction," he said, "you may enlighten us. Reading seeks meaning. Performance seeks applause." His fingers tightened on the cover. Lady Catherine inhaled softly, as if Louisa had committed the indecency. Nicholas's eyes dropped to the page again. He read another entry. "I stood beside him for 23 minutes while 6 gentlemen spoke of bloodlines, wagers, and the Marden course. Nicholas didn't once ask whether I was cold. I'd have forgiven the cold if he had noticed I was there." A woman's fan snapped shut. No one laughed at once. Nicholas did, but the sound was brief. "You counted the minutes. There wasn't much else to do. And you recorded them. There wasn't anyone else to tell." That answer reached him. She saw it. His gaze held hers for half a breath longer than pride allowed. Then Lady Catherine leaned close to his shoulder. "The next marked page," she murmured, "is the important one." Louisa saw Sir Malcolm's attention sharpen. Nicholas followed the ribbon with his thumb. "What's on it?" he asked. Lady Catherine's smile was gentle enough for church. "Proof that your wife wanted Asta removed from the Marden cup. Nicholas's thumb remained beneath the narrow ribbon. For one suspended moment, the ballroom seemed to wait upon that small movement. Louisa watched Lady Catherine rather than her husband. The older woman's expression held the soft concern of a relative forced into unpleasant duty, but her eyes were bright. Sir Malcolm Stroud stood half a pace behind her, his attention fixed on the book. Nicholas opened to the marked page. "Here we are," he said, "my wife's campaign against the pride of Carrowden." No one laughed immediately. Curiosity had begun to outweigh amusement. He read. Astor shortened his stride again this morning when turning from the lower paddock. It wasn't fatigue. The hesitation came when his near forefoot met the packed ground. "Mr." Stroud said, the horse had merely grown clever enough to conserve himself. Horses don't conserve themselves by flinching. Nicholas's eyes lifted. "You examined him?" "I watched him." "From the rail?" "From beside his shoulder." Lord Fenmore gave a low whistle. Her Grace entered the favourite's box herself. "Astor knows me," Louisa said, "better than some men in this room do." The remark drew no laughter. Nicholas looked down again. Marlowe's lameness was called a training strain, but the swelling didn't appear where Mr. Stroud claimed it should. His plate had been removed before I could inspect it. When I asked where it had gone, "The farrier," said Sir Malcolm, ordered the old iron discarded. Sir Malcolm's pleasant expression did not alter, yet one hand closed around his cane. "That is hardly sinister. Used plates are discarded every day. Not before the owner has seen them when a horse comes lame after a private trial," Louisa replied. "You aren't the owner," Malcolm said. "No, I'm merely the woman whose household paid for the horse, the stable, the farrier, and your advice." A few faces turned toward him. Nicholas's jaw tightened. "Louisa, you asked for explanation. I asked whether you wanted Astor withdrawn. You asked by reading my private thoughts to a ballroom." Lady Catherine touched Nicholas's sleeve. "The next passage, dear boy. It makes her meaning plain." Louisa saw Portia lower her fan. The young woman had stood near her mother all evening, lovely in pale blue silk and unusually quiet. Now her gaze moved from the ribbons to Louisa's face. Guilt appeared there too quickly to be mistaken. Portia had seen the pages before tonight. Perhaps she had done more than see them, Nicholas read. "If Nicholas runs Astor in the Marden Cup without a second examination, he'll be risking the horse to preserve a man's pride. He trusts Malcolm because Malcolm flatters what he already believes. He trusts me only when I remain agreeable." A murmur travelled through the circle. Sir Malcolm smiled without warmth. "There it is. Her Grace objects not to the horse's condition but to my influence." "Do you deny changing the farrier schedule?" Louisa asked. "I deny that a lady's observations from a paddock rail outweigh years of judgment." "Then answer the question." Malcolm's gaze shifted toward Nicholas. "I altered the schedule because the first man had become slow and sentimental. Racing requires decisions, and secrecy, efficiency." Nicholas raised one hand. "Enough." His voice carried farther than before. He turned another page, and Louisa felt something inside her grow still. She knew the entry. It had been written after Nicholas returned from Newmarket and spoke for 20 minutes about Astor's bloodline without once asking why Louisa's hands smelled of liniment. Nicholas spoke of the horse tonight as though devotion were a virtue only when given to something that couldn't answer him. "I listened because I still wanted to know what he loved. I wondered whether he'd ever speak of me with half such certainty." The words did not invite laughter. Nicholas stopped. Louisa remembered writing them while the house settled around her. She had not meant them as accusation. They had been a confession to paper, because paper did not turn away. "Continue," Lady Catherine said softly. Nicholas did not move. "You wished us to hear it," Louisa said. "Don't lose courage now." His eyes met hers. The familiar charm was gone. "You might have spoken to me." "I did. Not like this. You never stayed long enough to hear anything like this." Lord Fenmore looked down at his gloves. A woman near the edge of the circle stepped back. Nicholas returned to the diary. Marlowe went lame 3 days after Mr. Stroud changed the shoeing order. Astor shortened his stride after the same man attended him. If this is coincidence, it is a disciplined one. Sir Malcolm's cane struck the parquet once. This is absurd. Louisa saw his eyes fix on the page before Nicholas had finished. Not on her, on the page. "Why?" she asked. "Because you've decided that every inconvenience is a conspiracy." "I decided nothing. I recorded a pattern." "You recorded resentment. Then why does Marlowe's name trouble you?" Malcolm's face changed by less than a breath. Nicholas saw it. His attention moved from the diary to Malcolm. "Does it?" Nicholas asked. Malcolm recovered at once. "What troubles me is seeing a fine horse endangered by domestic melodrama." "A fine horse is exactly what concerns me," Louisa said. "Not your wager, not your pride, the horse." Lady Catherine opened her fan. "No one doubts your tenderness, Louisa. It is your judgment that has become unreliable." Tenderness and judgment aren't enemies. In a neglected wife, they may become confused. The words were delivered with maternal sorrow. Their cruelty lay in their calmness. Catherine had chosen her weapon well. If Louisa defended her marriage, she confirmed the neglect. If she defended the horses, she appeared obsessed. If she showed pain, Catherine would call it instability. Nicholas seemed to feel the trap only after it had closed. He shut the diary halfway, then opened it again. "Did you ask Portia to copy these pages?" Louisa asked. Portia went white. Lady Catherine answered before her daughter could speak. What a strange accusation. She knew where the ribbons were. "Portia has been concerned for you. Portia has been afraid of you." The fan in Catherine's hand stopped. Portia's lips parted, but no words came. Nicholas looked from mother to daughter. "Portia?" "Aye," her voice failed. Catherine's gaze touched her, and Portia lowered her eyes. "We'll discuss that later," Nicholas said. "No," Catherine replied gently. "You'll finish now, otherwise Louisa will claim we silenced the only passage that matters." Sir Malcolm stepped nearer. "Her Grace has made grave suggestions about the Marden stable. Sentiment shouldn't be permitted to poison judgment." Louisa watched him. He wanted the book opened. He also feared what remained in it. Nicholas turned another page. This one held no ribbon. I asked Nicholas whether he had inspected Marlowe's removed plate. He said, Malcolm had already explained the injury, and there was no reason to disturb the household with needless suspicion. Nicholas looked up slowly. "Did I say that?" "Almost word for word. I don't remember. That has been the trouble." His face tightened. "Have you seen the plate?" she asked. "No." "Did you ask where it went?" "No." "Then before you read another line about my judgment, remember that yours has rested entirely upon Malcolm's." The silence pressed closer. Sir Malcolm shifted his cane. Portia stared at the floor. Catherine's expression remained serene, though the ribs of her fan bent beneath her fingers. Nicholas looked down. Only one page remained. It was unmarked. Something thin lifted the paper near the binding, no more than the edge of a hidden packet. His thumb moved toward it. Lady Catherine's voice came quickly. "That page wasn't there when I saw the book." Louisa met her eyes. "No," she said, "it wasn't." Nicholas's thumb stopped against the raised edge beneath the final page. Lady Catherine's answer had come too quickly, and everyone near enough to hear it knew. Portia's face had lost all colour. Sir Malcolm shifted toward the open side of the room. Nicholas looked first at his aunt, then at the unmarked page. "You've seen the rest of the book?" he asked. Catherine's fan opened with a soft snap, only enough to understand that Louisa's distress has gone much further than anyone guessed. "That isn't what I asked. Nicholas, don't let her turn suspicion into spectacle." Catherine had placed the diary in his hands beneath 100 candles, yet now spectacle had become Louisa's invention. Nicholas opened the page fully. A fold of paper had been worked into a narrow pocket near the binding. Its edge lifted as he moved. Something small and metallic pressed against the paper from within. Louisa said nothing. She had written the page that afternoon after finding the clasp disturbed. If Catherine meant to steal private words, Louisa had decided to deny her certainty. Nicholas began to read. Marlowe's plate was not lost. A piece of it was left beside his stall, where the straw had been swept too carefully and the iron filings had not. Sir Malcolm's cane struck the floor. "This is nonsense." Nicholas did not look at him. "The fragment is crescent-shaped. Its edge was filed thin enough that the plate could fail under a hard gallop while appearing sound at rest. Asta is to be shot again within 2 days by the man Sir Malcolm selected." The murmur that rose was not amused. Guests who had missed the words still understood the names. Asta, Marlowe, Marden. Society understood a wagered favourite and a lamed horse more readily than a wife's loneliness. Nicholas's voice had changed. The brightness was gone. He read more slowly. "Lady Catherine has already seen the earlier pages. She has had passages copied. She believes private grief will make public warning look like jealousy. She may be right, because Nicholas has always trusted wit when patience would have required more courage." Catherine stepped forward. "Give me the book." Nicholas lifted one hand without looking at her. She stopped. Louisa had never seen anyone halt Catherine with so little motion. "If Nicholas reads this aloud," he continued, and his voice faltered for the first time, "then Lady Catherine has trusted his wit to make my warning sound like a jealous wife's fancy. I loved him. I will not remain where my love is a jest, and my judgment is madness." The final word seemed to extinguish the room. The orchestra had stopped. Louisa had not noticed when, beyond the circle, dancers stood apart. A servant held a silver tray without moving. Even Lord Fenmore had lowered his eyes. Nicholas stared at the page as though the handwriting might rearrange itself into mercy. The paper pocket loosened. A small packet slipped free, struck the parquet and opened. A dark steel crescent spun once in the candlelight before settling near Nicholas's shoe. Sir Malcolm moved first. He turned sharply toward the terrace doors. "Stroud." Nicholas's voice was quiet. Malcolm stopped. "I have no intention of remaining while a private domestic grievance becomes an accusation against my honor." "You were willing to remain while it was an accusation against hers." Nicholas bent and picked up the crescent between 2 fingers. He did not hand it to Malcolm. "Is this from a racing plate?" "It could be from any scrap of iron in England." "That wasn't my question." Malcolm's mouth hardened. "I'm not a farrier, yet you replaced one." Nicholas had not defended her, not yet. He was doing what he should have done before the first laugh. He was asking a question. It was a beginning, but it could not restore what he had taken. Nicholas looked at the crescent, then at Louisa. "Is this what you found beside Marlowe's stall?" "Yes." "When?" 3 days ago. "Who has handled it?" "I have." She glanced toward Catherine. And now you, Catherine drew herself upright. You cannot seriously believe this performance. Nicholas turned to the nearest footman. Close the ballroom doors, he added at once. No one is being detained. The ball is ended. Carriages will be called in order. Then he faced Malcolm. You will not enter Carrowden House, Marden Park, or any Carrowden stable until this matter has been examined. Malcolm's face darkened. You would insult me before London on the strength of a woman's diary. Nicholas looked toward Louisa. The shame in his expression was no longer hidden by charm. No, he said. I have already insulted my wife on the strength of another woman's suggestion. I won't compound it by ignoring the first piece of evidence placed before me. Catherine's fan closed. Nicholas, think of what people will say. They will say what they witnessed. His gaze traveled over the circle. And they will say I permitted it. No one answered. Nicholas called for his private secretary. When the man came, he gave instructions without lowering his voice. A telegraph was to be sent to Marden Park. The forge, shoeing shed, discarded iron rack, racing orders, and stable books were to be sealed under the steward's eye. No horse was to be shod, moved, or exercised until independent inspection. Sir Malcolm's agents were to be denied access. Mr. Stephen Dacre was to be summoned from Lincoln's Inn at first light. An independent veterinary surgeon was to be engaged, not one recommended by the racing office. And my wife's rooms, Nicholas said, looking directly at Catherine, are to be locked. No servant, guest, or relation enters without her Grace's permission. Catherine went still. Portia's fan trembled. Nicholas turned back to Louisa and held out the diary. He placed the steel crescent on its open cover. He did not step closer. This belongs to you. Louisa took the book first, then folded the packet around the fragment with careful fingers. Their hands did not touch. She closed the brass clasp, though it no longer felt like protection. Nicholas seemed to understand that. Louisa, he said. It was the first time that evening he had spoken her name without using it as part of a performance. I should never have opened it. No. His face tightened at the simplicity of her answer. I will escort you upstairs. You won't. There are still guests in the house. Guests you invited. Humiliation you made possible. I don't require your arm to cross my own floor. He absorbed the words without protest. Then I'll have the carriage brought. The Templeton carriage. Nicholas looked at her. You're leaving. I am going to Templeton House. Tonight? Before another person decides that being my husband, my aunt, my cousin, or my guest gives them ownership of my silence. Portia flinched. Catherine's expression hardened. But Louisa had no strength left to spend on either of them. Nicholas lowered his voice. Let me come tomorrow. You may send a card. The answer struck him more deeply than anger. A husband required permission to call upon his wife. The room heard it. Louisa gathered the diary against her ribs because it was hers. Nicholas moved aside. For once he did not lead, he did not follow. As Louisa crossed the ballroom, the guests who had laughed opened a path in silence. Behind her, Nicholas ordered the orchestra dismissed, the supper closed, and every remaining carriage called. No one mistook his authority for absolution. At the doorway, Louisa paused only when he spoke again. Louisa. She looked back. He stood beneath the chandeliers with the whole ballroom watching him and no performance left to offer. I'm sorry. She held his gaze. You're ashamed, she said. Tomorrow, we'll discover whether you're sorry. Then she left him in the silence he had made. By 10 o'clock the next morning, the steel crescent lay inside a folded sheet of foolscap on the walnut table at Templeton House, and Mr. Stephen Dacre had pressed his seal across every edge. Louisa watched the red wax cool beneath the solicitor's signet. The fragment had not left her possession since the ballroom until she placed it in his hands before two witnesses, her maid, Mrs. Vale and Dacre's senior clerk. He had recorded the hour, the condition of the metal, and the exact words with which she identified it. Nothing about the procedure felt dramatic. That steadiness was its comfort. The previous night had been all chandeliers, whispers, and laughter. This morning offered ink, witnesses, and a locked dispatch box. "I will carry it to Lincoln's Inn myself," Dacre said. "Until then, it remains in this room under my clerk's eye." Louisa nodded. The green Morocco diary rested beside her, closed and clasped. She had not opened it since leaving Carrowden House. She could still hear Nicholas's voice, reading from it, polished at first, then stripped of performance by the final page. Dacre studied her over his spectacles. "His Grace has sent a calling card." Mrs. Vale brought it forward on a small silver salver. The card bore Nicholas's name and title in severe black type. Beneath it, in his own hand, he had written, "I ask permission to call at 11. I will remain no longer than you permit." Louisa read the line twice. A husband requesting permission to enter the house where his wife had taken refuge should not have felt extraordinary. Yet it did. "Tell him 11, she said. 15 minutes. Dacre's brows rose slightly. "Shall I remain?" In the adjoining room. At precisely 11, the knocker sounded. Nicholas was shown upstairs. But the footman did not open the sitting-room door until Louisa gave the order. She stood near the mantel with the diary on the desk behind her. Nicholas appeared at the threshold and stopped. He wore a dark morning coat, and the sleeplessness in his face made him look older than he had beneath the ballroom lights. He did not step across the carpet. "You may come in," Louisa said. Only then did he enter. The restraint was small. It was also the first thing he had done that morning which belonged to her rather than to his own urgency. He remained several feet away. "Dacre told me the fragment has been sealed." It has. The telegraph reached Marden Park shortly after midnight. The steward sealed the forge, shoeing shed, discarded iron rack, and racing office. No horse has been exercised or reshod. And Malcolm denied access to every Carrowden property, his servants and agents as well. Nicholas drew a folded paper from his coat, but did not offer it until Louisa held out her hand. "These are the orders. They also state that no stable servant is to be dismissed, punished, or removed from tenancy for giving evidence." She read the page. The language was direct. Nicholas had signed it before two witnesses. "That was necessary," she said. "It should have been done before anyone was questioned." "Yes." She looked up. He had not tried to turn her acknowledgement into praise. "I also sent a statement to every household represented in the ballroom last night." He continued. "It says I took your private book, ignored your request to stop, and made your confidence into entertainment. It names no one else as responsible for my choice. You did not blame Lady Catherine, no, or Sir Malcolm." "No." His mouth tightened. "She placed the book in my hand. I chose what to do with it." The sentence settled between them. It did not repair anything. It did not ask to. Louisa crossed to the window. Bloomsbury moved beyond the glass with its ordinary morning sounds. Wheels passed over the street. A vendor called from the corner. No one outside knew that the Duke of Carrowden stood in his wife's sitting room, waiting to learn whether he would be allowed another minute. "Marlowe went lame 6 days ago," she said. Nicholas's attention sharpened, but he did not interrupt. It happened during a private trial at Marden Park. He had been sound that morning. When he returned, there was tenderness above the hoof, though not where Malcolm claimed a training strain should present. The racing plate had already been removed before I reached the forge. Who removed it? The farrier, on Malcolm's order. And the fragment? I found it 3 days ago beside Marlowe's stall. The straw had been swept, but not well enough. There were iron filings near the wall. The crescent had lodged beneath the edge of the manger. Nicholas's face changed. You carried it to London yourself, wrapped in paper inside my reticule. Why did you not bring it to me? Louisa turned from the window. I did bring you concern. You called it needless suspicion. I did not know there was evidence. You did not ask whether there was. The answer struck cleanly. Nicholas lowered his gaze for a moment. No, I did not. Louisa returned to the desk and rested her fingertips beside the closed diary. 2 evenings ago, I noticed the clasp had been disturbed. The scratch beside the keyhole had changed. 3 ribbons marked pages I had not marked. Portia knew where those ribbons were last night. Lady Catherine knew enough of the earlier entries to direct you from one humiliation to the next. You believed she had copied them. I suspected it. So you wrote the final page after that, yesterday afternoon, and placed the fragment behind it. Yes. Nicholas looked toward the diary, then immediately away. It was a deliberate movement. He had learned at least enough not to stare at what had ceased to be available to him. You used the book as bait, he said. I used it to leave a warning where the thief would reveal herself by taking it. You expected Catherine to read it privately. I expected her to bring selected words to you and persuade you to send me away quietly. I did not expect my husband to read them to a ballroom. His breath left him slowly. Nor should you have. Your aunt stole the book. Your choice made the theft powerful. I know. Do you? Louisa asked. Because shame can look very much like understanding when a room has turned against a man. Nicholas met her eyes. There was no charm in his face now, no practiced ease. I know that I chose contempt because it was easier than asking whether you might be right. I know I enjoyed the room's attention until your words forced me to see what I was doing. I know that stopping at the final page does not excuse reading the first. Louisa felt the truth of the admission, and that made it more dangerous, not less. A false apology could have been dismissed. This one asked nothing, yet some wounded part of her still wanted to lean toward it. She did not. You have 5 minutes remaining, she said. Nicholas accepted the boundary with a slight inclination of his head. Dacre proposes that we travel to Marden Park tomorrow. He wants the discarded rack opened before witnesses. I will take a later train if you prefer. I do. Will you direct the questions concerning the horses? The request surprised her more than the apology. Yes, if I am not overruled whenever Malcolm's answer sounds more comfortable. You will not be. Do not promise what you have not yet proved capable of doing. He absorbed that too. Then I will say only that the authority will be yours, and I will put it in writing. Louisa studied him. The stable staff must be protected before we arrive, not merely from dismissal, from lost wages, withdrawn references, and pressure on their families. I will add those protections today, and no one searches private trunks without Dacre present. Agreed. The clock on the mantel began to strike the quarter hour. Nicholas looked at it, then back at her. He did not ask for more time. Louisa, Carrowden House should have been the safest place for your private thoughts. It ceased to feel like my home when you made my mind public property. Pain crossed his face, but he did not defend himself. I am sorry. She held his gaze. I believe you regret it. That is not the same. No. The final strike faded. Nicholas moved toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped but did not turn back into the room. May I send word when Dacre confirms the forge rack has been preserved? You may, and may I call again before we leave? Louisa considered him. Send a card. I will. He stepped into the corridor. The door closed without argument, command, or backward appeal. Louisa remained where she was until his footsteps had disappeared. Then Dacre entered from the adjoining room, carrying a newly arrived telegram. He handed it to her, and she read the message once. The discarded iron rack at Marden Park had not been cleared. Marlowe's removed plate might still be there. The train left London beneath a low grey sky, carrying Louisa, Mrs. Vale, and Mr. Dacre's senior clerk toward Kent, with the sealed packet locked inside a leather dispatch case at the clerk's feet. Louisa had watched him place the case beneath the opposite seat before the train moved. She had watched him test the brass lock twice. The steel crescent remained exactly where it belonged, wrapped in foolscap, crossed with red wax, and marked with the hour it had passed from her hand into legal custody. Nothing else in her life felt so orderly. The countryside opened beyond the window in wet green fields, and hedgerows washed clean by morning rain. Mrs. Vale spoke only when necessary. The clerk spent most of the journey reviewing Mr. Dacre's written instructions, which required every object to be identified before witnesses, every transfer to be recorded, and no discarded plate to be moved until the sealed fragment had been opened in the same room. Nicholas had taken a later train at Louisa's request. She knew this because his card had arrived before breakfast, stating the departure hour he intended to use and asking no permission to join hers. That restraint mattered. She did not yet know how much. At the small Kent station, the Marden Park carriage waited with the estate crest hidden beneath a plain travelling cover. Louisa had ordered it so. She would not arrive as spectacle. The clerk sat opposite her, the dispatch case between his boots, while Mrs. Vale watched the rain gather along the glass. By the time the carriage entered the long lime avenue, the clouds had lifted enough to reveal Marden Park beyond the trees. The pale stone house stood on rising ground, composed and familiar, but Louisa felt no sense of homecoming. Her attention went at once to the stable roofs beyond the east lawn. The steward met them at the side entrance with the master farrier and 2 witnesses already assembled. One was the senior groom, the other was the estate carpenter, chosen because he had no authority under Sir Malcolm and no interest in racing wagers. The forge has remained sealed since his Grace's telegram, the steward said. No one has entered. Louisa looked at the wax strip across the latch. The steward's signet pressed one end. The housekeeper's pressed the other. Both impressions were intact. Open it, she said. Inside, the forge smelled of cold iron, leather, ash, and damp earth. Tools hung in ordered rows along the wall. The discarded shoe rack stood at the rear beneath a narrow window. It was a simple wooden frame divided into shallow compartments, each marked by horse and date before the old iron was sent away for scrap. The master farrier, Mr. Bell, held himself stiffly. I was told not to touch anything after midnight, he said. You were told correctly, Louisa replied. Show us Marlowe's compartment. Bell pointed to the 3rd shelf from the bottom. Several worn plates lay stacked together. One had been placed face down. Louisa saw the edge first. A narrow section along the inner heel appeared darker than the rest, as though the metal had been worked recently and then rubbed with soot. Mr. Dacre's clerk opened his notebook. No object is to be lifted until identified by the farrier and observed by both witnesses. Bell swallowed. That is Marlowe's old near-fore racing plate. How do you know? Louisa asked. My forge mark is here, Your Grace, and there is a shallow notch beside it for Marlowe. I mark every plate before fitting. Lift it. Bell did so with both hands. The plate was lighter than Louisa expected. Its outer edge bore the ordinary polish of use. The inner heel did not. There the iron had been filed into a narrow taper, thin enough to flex beneath pressure. A clean crescent was missing from the weakest point. No one spoke. The clerk set the dispatch case on the workbench and asked each witness to inspect the unbroken seals. Both confirmed them. He cut the string, lifted the waxed foolscap, and exposed the steel fragment. Her Grace identified this object in London on the 19th of May, he said. It has remained sealed since that time. He placed it on a square of white cloth. Louisa did not touch it. Bell lowered Marlowe's plate beside the fragment. The crescent fitted the broken heel so precisely that the jagged edge vanished. A small breath escaped the senior groom. The carpenter leaned closer, but kept his hands behind his back. It belongs to this plate, Bell said. His voice had changed. There's no mistaking it. Could it have broken through ordinary wear? Louisa asked. Bell studied the filing. Not like this. The heel has been thinned from the inner side. A man could look at it from outside and see nothing wrong. What would happen under a hard gallop? It might hold. Bell paused. Or it might turn beneath the hoof. Louisa pictured Marlowe driving forward through the final length of a trial, weight falling upon metal weakened where no groom would think to look. Her hands remained steady. When was it removed? 6 days ago, after he came in lame. Who ordered it discarded before inspection? Bell's eyes moved toward the steward. Sir Malcolm. The forge door opened behind them. Nicholas entered with Mr. Dacre. He had arrived without announcement, rain still darkening the shoulders of his coat. He stopped inside the doorway rather than moving directly to Louisa. Continue, he said. Bell bowed. His Grace has asked how the plate failed. Her Grace was asking, Nicholas replied. Bell looked back to Louisa. The correction was quiet, but every man in the forge heard it. The weakening was deliberate, Bell said. The break happened where the filing was deepest. Nicholas approached the workbench. His gaze settled on the fitted crescent, then on Louisa. You were right. The words carried no grandeur. They were better for it. About the plate, she said. We don't yet know who altered it. No, he turned to Bell. Who had access to the forge? Myself, the journeyman, and 2 apprentices. Sir Malcolm came through when he pleased. His racing man did as well. Mr. Dacre began listing names. Louisa examined the plate again. Where is Astor? In the South Range, the senior groom said. He hasn't been exercised. I want to see him before anyone handles another shoe. Nicholas looked at her. I'll come if you permit it, you may observe. They crossed the yard with Mrs. Vale and the groom. Astor stood in a loose box open to the passage, his chestnut coat dark against the straw. He turned at Louisa's voice and lowered his head. She entered first. Nicholas waited until she nodded before following. Louisa ran one hand down Astor's shoulder, then rested her palm against the warm hollow where neck met chest. The horse's breathing was even. Nicholas placed his hand beside hers to feel the same rise and fall. Their fingers touched against the short hair. Neither moved at once. The contact was slight, accidental, and more unsettling than an embrace would have been, because there had been no performance in it. Louisa withdrew first. Nicholas let his hand fall without following hers. His breathing is sound, she said, but I want his near forefoot lifted. The groom complied. The plate appeared intact. Louisa traced the air above it without touching. When is he next to be shod? The steward produced the racing order from his pocket. Tomorrow morning. Nicholas took the page, read it, and handed it to Louisa. At the bottom, beneath the farrier's schedule, stood Sir Malcolm Stroud's authorization. He chose the time, Nicholas said. And the man, Louisa replied. Mr. Bell arrived, carrying Marlowe's plate wrapped in cloth. Your Grace, he said to Louisa, his unease now sharpened into certainty. There's one more thing. What? Those marks inside the heel. They weren't made by an ordinary file. He looked toward the locked tool room beyond the forge. Only one rasp in this yard leaves a broken line like that. Mr. Bell did not touch the tool room door. He pointed instead to the iron hasp, where the steward's wax still covered the lock. The rasp, I mean, belongs to Sir Malcolm's private racing case, he said. It isn't kept with the common tools. Nicholas turned to the steward. Where is the case? In the racing office, Your Grace. It was sealed under your midnight order. Mr. Dacre closed the cloth around Marlowe's altered plate and recorded the time before anything else moved. The steel crescent returned to its foolscap wrapping. The plate went into a separate paper parcel, marked by the farrier, the steward, and both witnesses. Louisa watched every seal pressed into place. The evidence was not permitted to become more dramatic than its condition required. That discipline mattered now. Too many people had already mistaken performance for truth. The group crossed the yard to the racing office. Rainwater darkened the cobbles, and the stable hands stood back from the windows as Nicholas passed. No one spoke. Louisa could feel fear moving through the yard more clearly than sound. Sir Malcolm had controlled wages, references, and assignments for years. A written order from a duke did not erase that habit in a morning. The seal on the racing office door remained intact. Inside, the steward opened a tall cabinet and removed a black leather case bearing Malcolm's initials in silver. Mr. Dacre examined the straps before allowing the farrier to unfasten them. The case contained measuring compasses, a hoof gauge, 2 small hammers, chalk, a folding rule, several narrow files, and 1 long rasp wrapped in oiled cloth. Bell lifted it carefully. Along one edge, a tooth was broken away near the middle. The gap created an irregular rhythm in the cutting surface. That's the one, he said. Louisa looked at the grooves inside Marlowe's plate, now visible through the opened paper parcel. The marks did not form a smooth line. At intervals, a shallow space interrupted them. Would that missing tooth leave those breaks? She asked. It could, Bell replied. I'd want to test it on scrap iron before swearing to it. Then do so under witness, Mr. Dacre said. Bell selected a strip of discarded iron that had been present before the room was opened. He drew the rasp across it 3 times. The result was unmistakable. Each line carried the same repeated interruption. Nicholas stared at the marks. Does that prove Malcolm used it? No, Louisa said, before Bell could answer. It proves the tool could have made the grooves. We still need to know who held it. Nicholas looked at her, then inclined his head. Yes, Mr. Dacre ordered the rasp wrapped and sealed separately. When the inventory was complete, Steward produced the list of men who had entered the racing office during the previous month. Sir Malcolm's name appeared repeatedly. So did that of his racing man. Beneath them, in a younger hand, stood Jacob Preece, apprentice to Mr. Bell. Why would an apprentice enter this office? Louisa asked. Bell frowned. To fetch orders, perhaps, though I would usually send the journeyman. Where is Jacob now? The steward looked toward the senior groom. He was expected at dawn. He hasn't reported. Bell's unease sharpened. The boy has never missed a morning. Nicholas turned toward the door. Send riders to every road between here and the village. Have the constable informed. Search the cottages. No, Louisa said. His attention returned to her at once. The old Nicholas might have ignored the interruption or mistaken it for challenge. This one waited. A line of mounted men will look like pursuit, she continued. If Jacob is frightened, he may believe he is being hunted for what happened to Marlowe. And if Malcolm has reached him, then force displayed too early may make him harder to protect. Nicholas's jaw tightened. You would have us do nothing? I would have Mr. Dacre speak to the rector. Jacob's mother attends the parish church. If the boy trusts anyone beyond the yard, it may be Reverend Cole. Mr. Dacre nodded. A sensible approach. Nicholas looked through the window toward the lower road. Every instinct in him seemed to pull toward command. Louisa saw the effort it cost him to remain still. Very well, he said. Dacre will go through the rector, and Jacob's mother must be protected before he says a word, Louisa added. Not afterward, as payment. Nicholas turned to the steward. Prepare a written guarantee. Her tenancy is secure for the remainder of her life, provided she wishes to remain. Jacob's apprenticeship and wages will continue whether he gives evidence or not. The steward hesitated. Sir Malcolm approved those tenancies personally. Sir Malcolm approves nothing at Marden Park now. Nicholas looked at Louisa. Will that satisfy the immediate danger? It will reduce it, then put it in writing before noon. He did not smile when he said it. He did not wait for gratitude. That afternoon, Mr. Dacre left for the rectory, while Louisa remained in the stable office with the farrier's records. Nicholas stood near the opposite window, reading the previous 6 weeks of shoeing orders. The silence between them was no longer hostile, but neither was it easy. Malcolm has sent word to London, Nicholas said at last. He claims you're manufacturing a scandal to take control of the Carrowden stable. That is efficient of him. He knows the language society will believe. So did Lady Catherine. Nicholas closed the book. So did I. Louisa looked up. There was no defense in his face. You knew which lines would make them laugh, she said. Yes. You knew because you knew the room. I knew the room better than I knew my wife. The admission landed without ornament. Nicholas moved no closer. I used laughter because uncertainty made me feel powerless, he said. If I made the page absurd, I did not have to ask whether it might be true. That explains the impulse. It doesn't excuse the choice. No. A carriage sounded in the yard. Mr. Dacre had returned alone. He entered with mud on his boots and a sealed note in his hand. Reverend Cole had found Jacob's mother, but Jacob had not gone home. A message, however, had been left beneath the rectory door. It stated that the boy would speak only if the Duke did not attend. Nicholas read it once. Do you want me present? He asked Louisa. No. The answer came without softness. He folded the note and returned it to Dacre. Then I won't go. The next several days passed under tightened rules. No horse was shod without 2 witnesses. No stable hand lost a shift. The written guarantees for Jacob and his mother were posted with Dacre's seals in the estate office, where anyone could read them. Jacob still did not appear. By the morning of the 6th of June, public pressure had overtaken private caution. The Marden Downs trial could not be postponed without feeding Malcolm's claim that Louisa had invented danger to ruin the favourite. The stewards agreed that Astor might be walked in the parade ring before any decision about a gallop. Nicholas accepted the condition only after Louisa approved it. The ring was already crowded when Astor emerged beneath the pale June sun. County gentlemen leaned over the rails. Bookmakers called figures. Ladies turned their parasols toward the Duke's chestnut horse. Louisa stood beside Nicholas near the steward's enclosure, watching Aster's shoulders, then his knees, then the sequence of each hoof against the ground. At first, the stride appeared even. Then he rounded the near turn. His left forefoot landed. The fetlock rolled inward by the smallest degree. Louisa's breath stopped. The plate shifted against the hoof. "Stop him," she said. Nicholas looked at her. "What did you see?" The near-fore plate moved. The groom continued toward the trial gate. Louisa stepped forward. "Stop the horse now. Stop the horse now." Louisa's voice carried across the ring before the groom had taken another 3 steps. Heads turned. Aster tossed his head at the sudden tension in the reins, but Louisa was already moving toward him. The pale June light lay hard upon the packed earth, rails, parasols, and polished carriages. There was nowhere to hide an error before this crowd. "Your Grace," the groom called, looking not at Louisa, but at Nicholas. That glance told the whole story of the estate. Louisa could recognize danger and step into its path, yet the final command still belonged to the man beside her. Nicholas did not ask for proof. He did not look toward Sir Malcolm, the stewards, or the gentleman who had wagered heavily on Aster. "Stop him," he said. The groom obeyed. Protest rose from the rail. "The trial is due to begin," another man called. "The favourite cannot be withdrawn, because her Grace dislikes the look of a hoof." Lady Catherine's voice followed, smooth enough to cut through the rest. "Oh, I think we all know what her Grace dislikes." She stood beneath a striped canopy near the owner's enclosure, dressed in lavender silk, with Lady Portia at her side. In Catherine's gloved hand was a folded sheet of paper. Louisa recognized the slant of her own handwriting before the older woman opened it. "Those are mine," she said. Catherine smiled sadly. "Copied for the protection of this family. Stolen for its humiliation." The people nearest the rail shifted closer. Catherine raised the page. "Shall I read what the Duchess wrote about her husband and his racing?" Nicholas's face became still. "No." Catherine ignored him. "Nicholas loves the racecourse more faithfully than he has ever loved his wife. Aster receives his patience, his praise, and every hour I once hoped might be mine." A murmur moved through the crowd. Louisa felt the old wound reopen, but Catherine had chosen a true line and severed it from every truth around it. "A jealous wife," Catherine said, "has found a way to stop the horse her husband values most." Sir Malcolm stepped into view beside the steward's enclosure. He had not entered Marden Park since Nicholas's order, but the race ground stood beyond the estate gates and under the steward's authority. "I warned His Grace that domestic distress had begun to corrupt judgment," he said. "Now her Grace halts a public trial after staring at a moving plate from 20 yards away." Louisa looked at Aster. The chestnut shifted, and the near forefoot landed with another slight inward roll. "I saw enough. You saw what you wished to see. Then let the farrier remove the plate." Malcolm laughed shortly. "Before the county? To indulge this? To protect the horse. The horse is sound. Then the plate will prove you right." The challenge held him. His eyes moved to Nicholas, searching for the pride that had once served him. Nicholas stepped into the ring. The crowd quieted. He did not take Louisa's arm or place himself before her. He stood beside her, leaving her fully visible. "Aster will not run," he said. For a moment, even the bookmakers fell silent. Then the anger came. Men shouted about wagers, wasted journeys, and the honor of the Marden trial. Nicholas listened until the noise broke against his silence. "The horse does not run," he repeated. "If the plate is sound, I will bear the ridicule. If it is not, no wager in England is worth the injury." Louisa turned toward him. In the ballroom, he had chosen laughter before uncertainty. Here, before the sporting world whose admiration mattered to him, he chose her judgment before proof. The change did not erase what he had done. It did make something possible. Mr. Bell entered with his tools. 2 stewards followed to witness the inspection. Nicholas asked Louisa, "Will you show them what you saw?" Asta rolled inward when the near forefoot met the ground. The plate moved before the hoof lifted. She approached the horse slowly and spoke his name. Asta lowered his head. The groom held him while Bell raised the near forefoot. At first glance, the plate appeared ordinary. Its nails were seated. Its outer edge was clean. Malcolm exhaled loudly. There, this performance can end. Bell placed his thumb beneath the inner heel. His expression changed. "Wait," he pressed again. The metal shifted. One steward bent closer. "Remove it." Bell drew the nails carefully and lifted the plate free. Along the inner heel, the metal had been thinned until it looked sound from outside, but bent when he tested it between both hands. A gasp moved around the ring. Bell applied only modest pressure. The heel yielded. Not enough to break, but enough to show what a hard gallop might have done. The noise around the rails vanished. Catherine's copied page trembled once in her hand. Malcolm recovered first. "That proves nothing against me. Anyone might have altered it after the forge was sealed." "Someone did," Louisa said, "which means someone gained access after inspection." He pointed at her. "Including you." Nicholas moved, but Louisa spoke first. "I have not entered the forge or shoeing shed without witnesses since arriving at Marden Park. Mr. Dacre's clerk recorded every visit." Dacre lifted his notebook. "That is correct." "Records can be arranged," Malcolm said. "So can weakened plates," Louisa replied. One steward ordered the plate wrapped and marked. Bell identified the hoof, time of removal, and condition in which he had found it. Dacre placed the evidence in paper under the steward's seals. No one touched it again. The same men who had laughed moments before now avoided Louisa's eyes. She did not need their apology. She needed them to remember that she had spoken while belief was costly. Catherine folded the copied page. "A convenient discovery." Nicholas looked at her. "You will surrender every copy in your possession. You have no authority over my private papers." The irony passed through the enclosure like a draft. "Those are not your private papers," he said. "They are my wife's stolen words." Catherine's face hardened. "You choose her over your own family? She is my family." The answer landed between Nicholas and Louisa with more force than he seemed to expect. He did not look at her for reward. He turned to the chief steward. "Suspend the trial. Search every access record for the forge, shoeing shed, and parade stalls. No stable hand is to be dismissed, threatened, or removed from tenancy. Her Grace will direct the questions concerning the horses." Malcolm smiled contemptuously. "You would place racing authority in the hands of a woman who writes grievances in secret." Nicholas looked at the bent plate inside its sealed wrapping. "I would place it in the hands of the persons who saw what the rest of us preferred not to see." The crowd began to break apart. Louisa walked toward the gate as angry bettors pressed near the outer rail. Nicholas shifted to the side where the crowd was thickest, creating space without touching her. At the step beyond the ring, he offered his hand. His palm remained open. "May I?" Louisa looked at it. The memory of his fingers on her diary was too near, and trust was not a bridge crossed because he had taken one right step. "No." Nicholas lowered his hand at once. Of course. He stayed beside her as she descended alone. Portia waited near the emptying enclosure, pale beneath her bonnet. Catherine had already gone. "Your Grace," she said to Louisa, "I need to speak with you privately." Nicholas stopped several paces away. Louisa studied Portia's face. "About what?" Portia swallowed. "The pages." Her voice broke, then steadied. "I'm the one who copied them." Portia's confession seemed to alter the air more sharply than the bent racing plate had done. Around them, the Marden Downs crowd broke into restless clusters. Bookmakers argued over suspended wagers. Grooms led Asta away under the farrier's supervision. The stewards remained beside the sealed evidence, speaking in low, urgent voices. Louisa did not look toward any of them. She watched Portia. "Where did you copy the pages?" she asked. Portia glanced at Nicholas, then back at Louisa. 3 weeks ago, my mother told me she feared you were becoming unwell. She said, your private writings might help her persuade Nicholas to spare you a public collapse. Nicholas's face hardened at the use of his Christian name, but he did not interrupt. "How did she gain access to the diary?" Louisa asked. "She had noticed where you kept the escritoire key during morning calls. She sent her dresser upstairs while you were with the charitable committee." Portia's hands tightened around each other. The dresser opened the desk. "I waited in my mother's dressing room. She brought the diary down, wrapped in a shawl. And you copied it." "Yes." The word came out nearly soundless. "My mother marked the passages she wanted. She said I was helping prevent scandal. I copied them because she told me a wife who wrote such things might damage the whole family if the pages fell into crueler hands." Louisa looked toward the paper Catherine had displayed. The older woman had folded it before leaving, but the memory of Louisa's own sentence in another woman's possession remained vivid. "They were already in cruel hands," she said. Portia lowered her eyes. "I know that now. You knew enough then to understand the words were private." "Yes." Louisa let the admission stand without rescuing her from it. Portia had been controlled by Catherine for years. That explained obedience. It did not make the copying harmless. "Did you see the final page?" "No, it was not there. The last passage I copied was the one about Nicholas loving the racecourse more faithfully than his wife." Her gaze flickered toward Nicholas. "My mother said that line would prove jealousy if you interfered with Asta." "Did she mention Marlowe's plate?" "No. I knew nothing of the steel fragment until it fell in the ballroom." "And Sir Malcolm?" "He came to Thurlow House twice after the copying. My mother received him privately. I was sent out before they spoke." Portia swallowed. "I heard his name through the door once. Marlowe. Nothing more." Nicholas stepped nearer, though he remained outside Louisa's immediate space. "Where are the copies?" he asked. Portia opened the small reticule hanging from her wrist. From inside, she withdrew a packet tied with pale thread. "These are the remaining pages. Mother carried one to the parade ring. I took the rest from her writing cabinet this morning." Mr. Dacre approached when Louisa signaled him. He did not accept the packet at once. He called one of the stewards and the senior clerk to witness the transfer. Portia stated where she had obtained the copies, who had ordered them made, and that the originals remained in Louisa's diary. Only then did Dacre place the packet inside a fresh envelope and seal it. "Will you repeat this before the stewards?" he asked. Portia went still. Beyond the rails, a carriage bearing Lady Catherine's crest rolled toward the road. "If I do, she will deny everything." "That is not what Mr. Dacre asked," Louisa said. Portia raised her eyes. Shame had made her look younger, but there was something firmer beneath it now. Yes, I will testify. Your mother may cut you off, Nicholas said. She has threatened it before. Can she? Louisa asked Dacre. Not entirely. If Lady Portia's paternal settlement was properly executed, I would need to examine the trustees' copies. Portia gave a bitter little laugh. Mother says every shilling I possess depends upon pleasing her. Your mother has said many things today that require proof, Louisa replied. The answer did not comfort Portia. It did something better. It gave her a fact to stand upon. Nicholas looked toward the road where Catherine's carriage had disappeared. I will speak to her now. He turned as if command alone could shorten the distance. Louisa saw the anger in the set of his shoulders. It was not the careless pride of the ballroom. It was colder, sharpened by the knowledge that Catherine had used his vanity against his wife. Yet anger could still ruin evidence, frighten witnesses, and warn Malcolm before Jacob had been found. Louisa reached out and placed her hand around Nicholas's wrist. The touch was brief, deliberate, and entirely hers. He stopped at once. Beneath her fingers, his pulse beat hard. He did not cover her hand. He did not turn the contact into possession. He only looked at her. Wait, she said, until Jacob is protected. Catherine has admitted enough by fleeing. She has admitted nothing. Portia has. Louisa released his wrist. The absence of contact seemed to remain between them. If you confront Lady Catherine now, Sir Malcolm may learn exactly what Portia has surrendered. He may reach Jacob before Reverend Cole does. Nicholas looked toward Dacre. Do we know where the boy is? Not yet. The rector received another message this morning. Jacob will meet him only after dark, and only if no Carrowden rider follows. Nicholas's jaw tightened. Then Catherine remains untouched while the boy hides. For one day, Louisa said, not forever. He looked at the sealed packet in Dacre's hands, then at Portia. You are right. The words were quiet. They carried more weight than any order he might have shouted across the grounds. I will wait. Portia stared at Louisa's hand, as though she had witnessed something more intimate than a touch. Perhaps she had. In the ballroom, Nicholas had taken what was not offered. Here, Louisa had chosen contact, set its purpose, and ended it without resistance. Nicholas turned to Dacre. Find the trustees for Portia's settlement. Send no inquiry through Thurlow House. I will write to the original solicitor and the surviving trustee, Dacre said. If the settlement is intact, Lady Catherine cannot lawfully absorb the whole allowance, and until then, Lady Portia may remain at Marden Park if her grace permits. Portia looked quickly at Louisa. I do not ask to be forgiven. Good, Louisa said, because I am not ready to forgive you. Portia flinched, but held her ground. I understand. You may remain under Mrs. Vale's supervision until the steward's inquiry. You will not enter my rooms. You will not handle the diary. You will give Mr. Dacre every detail you remember. I will. And you will not tell your mother what Jacob has or has not said. I won't. The contractions made the promises sound human rather than ceremonial. Louisa hoped that would make them harder to evade. They returned to Marden Park before dusk. Portia was given a small guest chamber in the east wing, far from Catherine's accustomed rooms. Mrs. Vale retained the key to the connecting passage. Dacre sent his letters before the evening post. Nicholas did not ride after Catherine. Instead, he remained in the estate office while Louisa reviewed the access lists from the shoeing shed. Twice he began to offer an instruction and stopped himself. On the third occasion he asked, What do you need from me? The names of every man Sir Malcolm brought onto the grounds during the last month. I will have them copied, not by his former clerk, by Dacre's clerk, Nicholas. said, "Under your direction?" Louisa nodded. It was not tenderness. It was partnership in its earliest, most fragile form. Near 9 o'clock, a groom delivered a message from the station master. A London bookmaker had sent an urgent packet to Mr. Dacre after hearing the Marden trial had been suspended. Inside was a counterfoil bearing Sir Malcolm Stroud's name. The wager had been placed against Astor several weeks before Marlowe went lame. The counterfoil lay beneath Mr. Dacre's hand on the estate office table, its narrow paper strip marked with the date, the bookmaker's seal, and Sir Malcolm Stroud's name. The amount written beside Astor's entry was large enough to make even Nicholas pause. Malcolm had wagered against the Carrowden favourite nearly 3 weeks before Marlowe went lame. Could this have been placed by another man using his name? Louisa asked. Dacre shook his head. The bookmaker's accompanying letter states that Sir Malcolm appeared in person. His clerk recorded the transaction, and 2 regular patrons saw him sign. Nicholas stood at the far side of the table, one hand braced against the chair before him. He advised me to increase Astor's training schedule the following day. Louisa looked at the counterfoil again. The motive was no longer vague. Malcolm had not merely enjoyed influence or resented her questions. He had expected Astor to fail. "The wager proves interest," she said, "not method." "Jacob can prove method," Dacre replied, "if he comes." The rector had sent word shortly before dawn. Jacob Preece had returned to his mother's cottage under cover of darkness. He would speak at the rectory, but only in the presence of Reverend Cole, Mr. Dacre, Louisa, and one steward chosen by the racing authorities. Nicholas had not been invited. No one in the room mentioned the omission until Dacre folded the counterfoil back inside Anne's envelope. "I will remain here," Nicholas said. He looked at Louisa, not Dacre, "unless you ask otherwise." "I don't." "Then I won't go." The answer came without injury or argument. Louisa felt the weight of that obedience, because she knew how little it resembled the man who had once treated every closed door as a challenge to his rank. At noon, she travelled to the rectory with Dacre and one of the senior stewards. Reverend Cole met them in a small book-lined room at the rear of the house. Jacob sat near the window, twisting his cap between his hands. He was younger than Louisa had imagined, with a narrow face and soot still dark beneath his fingernails. His mother remained in the adjoining parlour with Mrs. Vale. "Before you speak," Louisa said, "your mother's tenancy and your apprenticeship are protected whether your evidence helps us, harms us, or changes nothing." Jacob stared at her. Sir Malcolm said no one could promise that but him. Sir Malcolm no longer decides it. Dacre placed the written guarantees on the table. Reverend Cole read them aloud, Jacob's shoulders lowered by a fraction. "Tell us about Marlowe's plate," Dacre said. Jacob swallowed. "Sir Malcolm gave me the rasp," he said, "Mr. Bell had fitted the heel too heavily, and that I was to take down the inner edge." "Did he tell you how far?" Louisa asked. "Until the plate flexed beneath my thumb." The room became very still. "Did you know it might fail?" "Not at first." "He said it was a balance correction." "I thought it was only because Marlowe pulled inward when tired." Jacob's fingers tightened around the cap. "After the trial, when the horse came back sore, I knew I'd done wrong." "What did Sir Malcolm say then?" "That I'd followed an ordinary instruction, and ought to be grateful he was willing to protect me. He told me if I spoke, Mr. Bell would dismiss me, and my mother would lose the cottage." The steward wrote each answer in a careful hand. "Who removed Marlowe's plate?" "Mr. Bell did, but Sir Malcolm ordered me to carry it to the scrap rack before anyone inspected it." Did you leave the fragment beside the stall? Louisa asked. Jacob shook his head. It broke when Mr. Bell pulled the plate. I saw the piece fall, but Sir Malcolm was there. I pretended not to notice. I thought if it remained, someone might find it. Louisa heard the fear beneath the confession. The crescent had not been planted for her. It had survived because a frightened boy had chosen not to erase the final trace. And Asta? She asked. Jacob's face tightened. I didn't touch Asta. Who did? Mr. Coyle, the stable hand Sir Malcolm brought from Newmarket. He had access after the forge was sealed because he carried the late feed orders through the parade stalls. Sir Malcolm told him which plate to loosen. How do you know? Dacre asked. Coyle came to me the night before the trial. He wanted the rasp. I refused. He said he didn't need it because the plate had already been thinned. He only needed to ease 2 nails so it would shift when the horse turned. Louisa thought of Asta's inward roll in the ring. A fraction later, a few yards farther, and the chestnut might have been sent into a gallop. Where is Coyle now? The steward asked. Gone toward London, I think. Sir Malcolm sent him away after the plate bent. Would you repeat all of this before the racing stewards? Jacob looked toward Reverend Cole. The rector gave no answer for him. Yes, the boy said at last. But I want it known that I didn't understand the first order until Marlowe came back lame. It will be known exactly as you have said it, Louisa replied. No more and no less. When they returned to Marden Downs near dusk, the grandstand stood empty beneath a clearing sky. The crowds had gone, leaving trampled paper, hoof marks, and the faint smell of cut grass. Nicholas waited near the lowest row, alone. He did not ask what Jacob had said until Louisa sat beside him. Then he listened without interruption, as she described the rasp, the weakened heel, the threat against Jacob's mother, and Coyle's part in Asta's plate. Malcolm used every authority I allowed him, Nicholas said when she finished. Wages, tenancy, access, my name. Yes, and I trusted him because his certainty was convenient. You trusted the version of the world that asked least of you. He looked toward the empty ring, as I did in the ballroom. Louisa folded her hands in her lap. The old grandstand creaked in the evening wind. Why did you laugh? She asked. Nicholas did not pretend not to understand, because the room was watching me. Because your words made me uncertain. Because if I made them absurd, I did not have to admit that I had failed to know my own wife. You preferred admiration. Yes. The honesty hurt more than an excuse would have done. He looked at her fully. I trusted their laughter because it asked less courage than trusting you. Louisa let the silence remain. He had begun to understand that words did not become truer because he spoke them beautifully. I may still love you, she said. His breath caught. But she continued, before hope could turn the sentence into forgiveness, and I may still refuse to trust you. I know. Do you? I am learning. He rested one hand on the bench between them, palm open, not touching her. May I? Louisa looked at his hand. She remembered the diary in those same fingers. She also remembered his hand lowered without protest outside the parade ring, his absence from the rectory because she had asked for it, and the public withdrawal of Asta before proof was complete. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Nicholas closed his fingers with care. He did not pull her nearer. He did not lift her hand to his lips. He simply held it. The steadiness of the gesture moved through her more deeply than urgency would have done. Your judgment is the thing I most fear losing, he said. Louisa looked toward the empty course. You lost it before you knew you valued it. Then I will earn whatever part of it you choose to give back. They remained joined through the silence that followed. When Louisa withdrew, Nicholas released her at once. A carriage turned onto the track below, its lamps catching the last light. The crest on the door belonged to Lady Catherine Armitage. Nicholas rose, but he did not step ahead of Louisa. "She has come with a proposal," he said. Louisa stood beside him. "Then let us hear what truth she believes can still be purchased." Lady Catherine entered the west drawing-room at Marden Park as though the house still belonged to the version of the family she controlled. Her lavender traveling silk had not creased during the journey. Her gloves were spotless. Only the tightness around her mouth betrayed that she had heard what happened in the parade ring. Louisa stood near the long windows with Mrs. Vale behind her. Nicholas remained beside the mantel. Mr. Dacre had taken a chair near the door, not as a guest, but as a witness. Catherine looked from one face to another. "Must every family disagreement now be conducted before a solicitor?" she asked. Nicholas did not offer her a seat. "This stopped being a family disagreement when you stole my wife's diary. I protected you from a woman whose jealousy has become dangerous." Catherine removed one glove finger by finger. The crowd at Marden Downs saw what she wanted them to see. They saw a weakened plate bend in the farrier's hands, Louisa said. Catherine's gaze settled on her. "And now you imagine yourself an authority because a horse happened to stumble at the convenient moment. Astor did not stumble. I stopped him before he could. How fortunate for your reputation." Nicholas's expression hardened, but Louisa spoke before he could. "You did not travel from London to discuss my reputation." Catherine placed her gloves on the table. "No, I came to prevent the destruction of this family over a boy's frightened story and a baronet's wager." Dacre's eyes sharpened. Catherine knew Jacob had spoken, though no public statement had yet been made. She must have learned from Malcolm or from someone near the rectory. "What do you propose?" Nicholas asked. Catherine turned toward him with the grave tenderness she had once used to guide his every public decision. "Cancel the steward's inquiry. Announce that Astor was withdrawn as a precaution. Malcolm will retire from racing affairs for reasons of health. Portia will return to me, and every copied page will disappear." "And Louisa?" Nicholas asked. Catherine sighed. "Your wife requires rest. Send her to the continent for 6 months. Switzerland, perhaps. Society understands nerves when they are handled discreetly." The room went silent. Louisa had expected cruelty. She had not expected Catherine to present exile as kindness with such confidence. "You want me removed from my own marriage and household," she said. "I want you spared the consequences of continuing." "Whose consequences?" "Yours, if the intimate details of your diary reach every breakfast table in London." Catherine looked at Nicholas. "There are more copies than Portia surrendered." Nicholas did not move. "You are blackmailing my wife with words you stole. I am offering you both a way to survive." "You offered me the same survival in the ballroom," he said. "All I had to do was believe contempt was judgment." For the first time, Catherine's composure slipped. "I gave you the truth. You gave me selected pages because you knew exactly what sort of man I had become." Nicholas stepped away from the mantel. "You knew I would choose applause over patience. You counted upon it. Do not make your weakness my crime. I am not." His voice remained low. "My weakness is mine. The theft is yours." Catherine's eyes flashed. "And what of the house of Stanhope? What of the Marden Cup? What of every owner and steward who will say the Duke of Carrowden could not govern his own stable or wife? They may say all of it. You would sacrifice generations of standing for her." Nicholas looked at Louisa. He did not reach for her. I nearly sacrificed her for that standing. Catherine followed his gaze and seemed to understand that the old appeal had failed. Portia will deny everything before the stewards. She has already given Dacre a witnessed statement, Louisa said. Then I will challenge it. She has always been impressionable. You taught her obedience and now mean to call its consequences instability. She is my daughter. She is not your property, Nicholas said. Catherine picked up her gloves. I will attend the Marden Cup. I will speak before every steward, owner, and patron who matters. If Portia stands against me, she will do so, knowing she has no mother and no home to return to. Her paternal settlement is being examined, Dacre said. You may possess influence over her allowance, Lady Catherine. You may not possess every right secured by her late father. Catherine turned on him. You presume much. I verify much. Nicholas crossed to the bell and rang once. Your carriage will be brought. Catherine stared at him. You cannot bar me from a public race ground. No, but you will not remain under my roof. Her face went pale with anger. When this ends badly, remember that I tried to save you. Nicholas opened the drawing-room door himself. That is what you have always called control. Catherine left without another word. Her carriage wheels had barely faded from the gravel when a groom arrived with Mr. Henslow, the independent veterinary surgeon. They found Astor in the South Range, resting his near forefoot on clean straw. The bent plate had already been removed and sealed under Dacre's supervision. Henslow examined the hoof, the nail holes, the sole, and the slight heat along the inner wall. Louisa stood by Astor's head while the chestnut breathed against her sleeve. Nicholas remained near the stall door until Henslow finished. There is tenderness, the surgeon said, straightening. Nothing that suggests lasting damage. Had he taken the turn at speed, the loosened plate might have shifted beneath him. Her grace stopped him before strain became injury. Nicholas's shoulders lowered by a fraction. When may he be exercised? Not for several days. Walking only, and no race. I would not enter him in the Marden Cup, even if he appears sound by then. He will not run, Nicholas said. There was no hesitation. And Marlowe? Louisa asked. Henslow's expression became more cautious. The earlier strain is healing. He should have the season off. With rest, he may remain comfortable. I would not return him to serious competition. Louisa stroked Astor's neck. 2 horses had been treated as instruments in a man's wager. One had been hurt, the other had escaped, because she had risked being called jealous before everyone whose opinion Nicholas valued. Henslow departed with Dacre to add his findings to the sealed record. The groom led Astor into the adjoining loose yard for a few quiet steps. Louisa remained in the empty stall. Nicholas stood outside the threshold. May I come in? He asked. Yes. He entered, but stopped several feet from her. The evening light came through the high window in a narrow gold band. You saved him, he said. I noticed him. The rest of us noticed him too. We saw speed, bloodline, odds, and expectation. You saw the fraction of a step that mattered. Louisa looked at the disturbed straw, because I was willing to believe discomfort before it became disaster. Nicholas absorbed the words. I was not. No. I believed authority meant never appearing uncertain. I thought command was the ability to decide before anyone else. Real authority is knowing whose knowledge must be heard, and I made yours ridiculous. He did not soften the sentence. I took the most private proof that you cared for me and used it to destroy your public credibility. Then, when the warning proved true, you still had to stand before a crowd and risk humiliation, again because I had taught them to doubt you." Louisa felt the pain of it rise, but this time he did not look away from what he had caused. "I cannot undo the ballroom," he said. "I cannot ask your forgiveness because Asta is safe or because I refused my aunt's bargain. Those are things I should have done without reward." His voice tightened. "I am sorry for the room, for the laughter, for every page after you asked me to stop, for making you feel that your mind was not safe beneath my roof." Louisa stepped toward him. The movement was hers before she fully understood it. Nicholas remained still. She closed the distance and rested her forehead briefly against his chest. His breath caught, but his arms stayed at his sides. "May I hold you?" he asked. Louisa nodded against him. Yes. Only then did his arms come around her. He held her carefully, without drawing her closer than she had chosen to stand. Louisa wrapped her arms around him in return. The embrace did not erase the ballroom. It did not restore trust in a single breath. It gave grief somewhere honest to rest. Nicholas lowered his cheek against her hair, but did not kiss her. Neither of them spoke of love. When Louisa stepped back, he released her at once. Beyond the stall, Asta walked soundly beneath the groom's hand. Nicholas watched the horse, then looked at Louisa. "Catherine will come to the Marden Cup. Then we will be ready. You will lead the evidence." "Yes." His gaze held hers. "And I will say what I did before anyone asks me to." Louisa believed he meant it. Whether he would endure the cost remained the question. On the desk upstairs, the green diary waited unopened. Before the stewards gathered, Nicholas would have to carry it back into public view and prove that this time possession would not become permission. At 9 o'clock on the morning of the 21st of June, Louisa placed the green Morocco diary inside a locked leather case and turned the key herself. Nicholas stood across the library table at Marden Park, close enough to receive it, but not close enough to presume that she had offered more than the object. Mr. Dacre, his senior clerk, and Mrs. Vale witnessed the transfer. The case was plain brown leather, reinforced at the corners, with a brass lock and a narrow label beneath the handle. Dacre had written upon that label, "Private property of Her Grace, the Duchess of Carrowden," to be opened only under the conditions stated below. Louisa kept the key on a ribbon at her waist. "The diary must be present, because Lady Catherine intends to claim that I added the final page after the ballroom," she said. "The stewards may inspect the stitching, the sequence of the paper, the binding, and the pressure marks where earlier pages were written. They may do so only in my presence. You may carry the case. You may place it before them. You may not open it, read from it, or quote it." Nicholas looked at the locked case rather than at the hand resting beside it. "I may carry and present it for examination. I may not open it, read it, or repeat any passage. The key remains with you. Yes, if the stewards request access, they ask you. Yes, if anyone else demands it, I refuse." Louisa met his eyes. "Including your aunt. Especially my aunt." There was no attempt at humor in the answer. Nicholas reached for the handle only after Louisa moved her hand away. Their fingers did not touch. He lifted the case and set it beside him with the care he might have given a sealed treaty. "I understand that being trusted to carry it doesn't make its contents mine." The words struck deeper because he did not ask whether she believed him. He had learned that understanding could be demonstrated without demanding immediate recognition. Dacre opened a document upon the table. "This is the authority statement," he said. "It transfers control of all questions concerning horse condition, shoeing practice, stable access, and witness order to Her Grace and the independent stewards for the duration of the inquiry. It also confirms that evidence of negligence within the House of Stanhope won't be withheld. Nicholas read every line. Add that no servant may be dismissed, denied wages, refused a reference, or removed from estate tenancy for giving truthful evidence. That protection already exists under your earlier order, Dacre said. Then repeat it here. I don't want any man claiming he misunderstood. Dacre made the addition. Nicholas signed first, then handed the pen to Louisa. Their hands overlapped for one brief moment around the shaft. The contact was voluntary on both sides. Neither withdrew sharply. Louisa felt the warmth of his fingers, the steadiness with which he waited, and the restraint that kept the moment from becoming a plea. She released the pen. Nicholas did the same. Dacre and the steward witnessed the signatures. Authority is now recorded, Dacre said. Her Grace directs the equine evidence. The stewards control the racing judgment. His Grace cannot suppress findings concerning his own household. Good, Louisa said. Nicholas looked at her. It should never have required paper for me to hear you. Since it did, the paper will stand. The evidence was assembled that afternoon in the estate office. Each object remained in separate custody wrapping until Dacre called its name. The steel crescent appeared first, still inside the foolscap, folded and sealed in London. The witnesses confirmed that the wax matched Dacre's record. Marlowe's altered plate came next, its missing heel aligned only for inspection before being returned to its parcel. Astor's weakened near fore. Plate remained under the racing steward seals, marked with the hour Mr. Bell had removed it in the parade ring. Malcolm's damaged rasp lay inside oiled cloth, its broken tooth visible but untouched. The bookmaker's counterfoil bore the original signature and seal. Portia's copied diary passages remained a separate packet, identified as copies and never confused with the intact pages of Louisa's book. Jacob's statement had been written at the rectory, read aloud to him, corrected once in his own words, and signed before Reverend Cole and a steward. Nothing is to be opened at the race ground until the chief steward calls for it, Louisa said. The sequence will be fragment, Marlowe's plate, rasp, Jacob's statement, Astor's plate, veterinary finding, counterfoil, and Portia's testimony. Why is the counterfoil so late? One steward asked. Because motive should follow method, she replied. If we begin with the wager, Malcolm will call the rest and attempt to fit evidence around suspicion. Let the physical pattern stand before the money explains it. The steward nodded and entered the order exactly as she gave it. Nicholas said nothing. His silence was not absence. It was disciplined attention. Near dusk, Portia entered, carrying a letter she had not opened. The seal belonged to Lady Catherine. It was delivered by her own footman, she said. He was instructed to watch me read it. Did he? Louisa asked. Mrs. Vale sent him away. Portia broke the seal before Dacre and unfolded 2 pages. Her face changed before she reached the second line. She says that if I testify, she'll declare publicly that my father doubted I was his child. She says my settlement can be challenged and that no respectable household will receive me. Nicholas rose. Anger moved across his face, but he did not reach for the letter until Portia offered it. Did your father ever question your parentage? Dacre asked. Not to me. The marriage settlement identifies you by name as his lawful daughter, Dacre said. I received the trustee's certified copy this morning. Lady Catherine cannot erase that with a threat. Portia looked at Nicholas. She'll say it before everyone. Then everyone will hear a mother attempt to destroy her daughter because the daughter told the truth. Nicholas replied, You won't answer her alone." He turned to Dacre. "Prepare notice to the trustees that any interference with Portia's allowance will be contested. Arrange a respectable residence under the settlement if she chooses not to remain here after the inquiry." "I don't want charity," Portia said. "It isn't charity," Louisa told her. "It is the protection your father placed in law. Accepting what is yours is not dependence." Portia folded the letter with shaking hands. "Will you still let me testify?" "Your mother's cruelty doesn't make your evidence stronger or weaker," Louisa said. "You will tell only what you know." "I will." After Portia left, Nicholas remained beside the darkening window. "Catherine will expect me to answer that threat publicly," he said. "Will you?" Louisa asked. "Yes, but not before the evidence. I will speak first about the diary and my conduct. Then you will lead the proof." He drew several handwritten pages from his coat. "This isn't a defense. It is my confession of what happened in the ballroom." Louisa did not ask to read it. "Don't make it eloquent." Nicholas looked down at the pages. "I had begun to." He tore them once across, then again, and placed the pieces on the table rather than in the fire. "I will speak plainly." The next morning, the 23rd of June, carriages crowded the road to Marden Downs before the first bell. Owners, bettors, gentry, stable hands, and several guests from the Mayfair ballroom filled the enclosures. Nicholas carried the locked leather case in full view. He did not test the lock. He did not ask for the key. Louisa walked beside him with Dacre and the chief steward. The evidence boxes were brought separately under seal. Portia waited within the witness enclosure, pale but upright. As the crowd turned toward the entrance, Lady Catherine stepped down from her carriage and entered the steward's enclosure as though she still expected the room to belong to her. Lady Catherine entered the steward's enclosure beneath the gaze of everyone who had come to see whether rank could still outrun truth. Sir Malcolm stood near the owner's rail, his face composed, though the hand resting on his cane had gone rigid. The chief steward called the inquiry to order. Nicholas placed the locked leather case containing Louisa's diary on the table before him and kept both hands at his sides. "Before any evidence is heard," he said, "I will state my own conduct. I took my wife's private diary after she asked me to return it. I read from it before guests for the purpose of humiliating her. By doing so, I helped make a serious warning appear to be jealousy. No one compelled me." Lady Catherine supplied the book. "I chose the cruelty." The words moved through the enclosure without the protection of wit. Several people who had laughed in the ballroom lowered their eyes. Catherine did not. "This inquiry concerns racing," she said, "not a husband's quarrel." Nicholas looked at her. "My conduct became part of the racing matter when it was used to discredit the person who identified the danger." The chief steward turned to Louisa. "Your Grace, you may proceed." Louisa stood beside the evidence table. She did not look toward the crowd. She looked at the objects whose condition could not be embarrassed into silence. Mr. Dacre opened the first sealed packet and displayed the steel crescent found beside Marlowe's stall. He then opened the separate parcel containing Marlowe's altered near-fore plate. Before two stewards and Mr. Bell, the fragment was placed against the broken heel. It fitted exactly. Bell explained the thinning along the inner edge and stated that ordinary wear would not have produced such deliberate filing. Dacre next presented Malcolm's rasp. Its broken tooth had left repeating gaps in the test marks made under witness. Those interruptions matched the irregular grooves inside Marlowe's plate. Sir Malcolm raised his voice. "A tool proves nothing. Half the stable could have touched it. "Then we will hear from the person who did," Louisa said. Jacob Preece entered with Reverend Cole. The boy's face was pale, but his answers were clear. He described Malcolm ordering him to file Marlowe's plate until the heel flexed beneath his thumb. He admitted obeying, because he believed it was a balance correction. He then described Marlowe's return from the trial, Malcolm's threat against his apprenticeship, and the threat to remove his mother from her cottage if he spoke. "Did you alter Asta's plate?" the chief steward asked. "No, sir." "Who did?" "Mr. Coyle loosened it after Sir Malcolm told him which nails to ease. He said the plate had already been thinned." Malcolm stepped forward. "The word of a frightened apprentice cannot condemn a gentleman." Nicholas spoke before the steward could answer. "His station does not make his memory less valuable than yours." Dacre opened the parcel containing Asta's weakened plate. Bell identified it as the one removed in the parade ring. He showed the inward thinning and the two loosened nail positions. Mr. Henslow then gave his finding. Asta had suffered only temporary hoof tenderness because Louisa stopped him before the trial gallop. Had the plate shifted at speed, the horse might have been seriously strained. Marlowe's earlier injury was consistent with a plate failing under pressure. He would recover with rest, but should not race again that season. The physical pattern had now appeared twice. The chief steward called for the bookmaker's counterfoil. Dacre unfolded the original paper and read the date, amount, and signature. Malcolm had wagered heavily against Asta before Marlowe went lame. "A man may wager against any horse he chooses," Malcolm said. "Yes," Louisa replied, "but when the same man controls the shoeing order, possesses the matching tool, intimidates the apprentice, and profits if the favorite fails, the wager ceases to be innocent context." Catherine rose. "This is all arranged to support a wife's grievance. The diary is the beginning of every accusation, and no husband can be blamed for reading what his own wife writes beneath his roof." The crowd shifted. Nicholas turned toward the locked case. For one heartbeat, Louisa saw the old room beneath the chandeliers and the book open in his hand. This time, he did not touch the lock. "Marriage gave me no right to turn private thought into entertainment," he said. "A roof does not make a wife's mind her husband's property." Catherine's face hardened. "Then let us inspect the final page. It may have been added after the ballroom." The chief steward looked to Louisa. She removed the key from the ribbon at her waist and opened the case herself. A paper conservator and the steward examined the intact stitching, the sequence of the leaves, the pressure marks beneath the writing, and the folded pocket near the binding. They confirmed that the final page belonged to the book and had not been inserted after the reading. Louisa closed the diary and locked it again. Nicholas never looked at a single line. Portia was called last. She entered the enclosure without her mother's escort. She identified the copied passages, admitted making them at Catherine's direction, and explained that her mother intended to use Louisa's private grief to make any accusation concerning Asta appear jealous. Catherine's voice cut across hers. "You have always been impressionable. Your father doubted you were even his child." Portia flinched. Dacre rose with the certified settlement in his hand. The late Marquess of Thurlow named Lady Portia as his lawful daughter and secured her provision through trustees. The document is valid. Nicholas looked toward Catherine. "Your threat has failed." The chief steward called the enclosure to silence and delivered the ruling. Sir Malcolm Stroud was expelled from the Marden meeting. Every entry under his authority was voided. He was suspended from all Carrowden racing affairs and barred from acting within the steward's jurisdiction pending broader review. The evidence of fraudulent betting, conspiracy, and intimidation would be placed before the local magistrate. Coil would be sought for examination. Malcolm's composure finally broke. "You would ruin me over a horse?" "No," Louisa said. "You ruined yourself by deciding that frightened people and injured animals were cheaper than your debts." He was escorted from the enclosure without ceremony. Catherine remained seated as if still waiting for Nicholas to recover his loyalty. He faced her before the assembled crowd. "You are barred from Carrowden House and Marden Park. You will have no authority over my household, my stable, or my wife. I am your mother's sister, and you used that place to teach me contempt." Portia did not return to Catherine's carriage. She left the enclosure with Dacre's clerk and Mrs. Vale, protected by the terms of her paternal settlement. The chief steward then recorded the reforms Louisa had required. Every racing plate would receive independent farrier inspection. Plate changes would require dual authorization. Stable workers could appeal directly to the stewards without passing through a racing advisor. A veterinary surgeon would review every horse before a major trial. Nicholas accepted the temporary suspension of Carrowden's racing authority while the new system was established. When someone asked whether Astor would still enter the Marden Cup, he answered, "No, he is sound enough to walk." That does not make him fit to become a spectacle. By late afternoon, the crowd had thinned. The evidence had been returned to Dacre's custody, and the chief steward had departed for the magistrate's office. Louisa stood alone inside a small retiring room beneath the grandstand when Nicholas entered carrying the locked leather case. He stopped at the threshold. "May I come in?" "Yes." He crossed the room and placed the case on the table before her. "I did not open it. I know. I wanted you to know without having to inspect the lock." Louisa touched the brass clasp. "I do." Nicholas drew a breath. No audience remained to reward his words. "I love you, Louisa. I loved being admired more than I loved being honest, and I nearly destroyed what was most honest in my life." His voice roughened, but he did not look away. "I do not ask you to return, because the stewards believed you. I ask for the chance to become a man whose belief is not dependent upon a crowd." Louisa felt the truth of her own answer before she spoke it. "I love you too." Hope moved across his face, but she raised one hand. "I will return by choice, not because the room has changed its opinion. I am going back to Templeton House. You may court me there, if you are willing to do so without assuming the ending." "I am." "You may write. I may not answer. I understand. You may call. You will still send a card." "I will." The silence between them was no longer empty. Nicholas stood close enough that she could see the restraint in every line of him. "May I kiss you?" he asked. Louisa answered, "Yes," and stepped toward him. His hand rose slowly to her cheek, giving her time to refuse. She did not. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened only when she placed her hand against his chest and leaned nearer. It held apology, longing, and the difficult beginning of trust. When they parted, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers without claiming another touch. "I love you," he said again. "And I love you," she replied. Then Louisa took the diary case into her own hands. That evening, she returned to Templeton House alone, not as a wife sent away, but as a woman choosing the terms on which love might find her again. By March of 1867, the scandal that had begun beneath the chandeliers of Carrowden House had passed from drawing-room amusement into the sober language of consequence. Sir Malcolm Stroud had been convicted of conspiracy, intimidation, and fraudulent conduct connected to racing wagers. His name disappeared from respectable meetings, and the men who had once praised his certainty now spoke of him only when required by legal record. Mr. Coyle had been found and examined after attempting to secure work under another name. His testimony confirmed Jacob Preece's account of Astor's loosened plate. Lady Catherine Armitage lived at her dower residence in Sussex, barred from Carrowden House and Marden Park. Invitations that had once arrived by the dozen became rare. Her social authority had not vanished in a single dramatic fall, but it had narrowed until she could no longer use the house of Stanhope as proof of her importance. Lady Portia occupied a modest house in Richmond under the protection of her paternal settlement. She had learned to manage an allowance without her mother's permission, and had begun receiving a few women who valued courage more than convenience. Louisa wrote to her occasionally. The letters were civil, honest, and never intimate. Portia's testimony had prevented further harm, but it had not erased the choice she made when she copied the diary. Forgiveness, Louisa had discovered, did not require false closeness. At Marden Park, the stable reforms had survived the attention that created them. Racing plates were inspected by an independent farrier before every serious trial. No alteration could be ordered by one man alone. Stable workers had direct access to the stewards through a written appeal kept in the office, where even the youngest apprentice could see it. Jacob completed his training under Mr. Bell and no longer lowered his eyes when Nicholas entered the forge. His mother remained secure in her cottage. Mr. Henslow visited before each major exercise and recorded his findings without interference from owners, advisors, or bettors. Carrowden's temporary racing suspension had been lifted after the stewards confirmed that the new system functioned as promised. Nicholas entered fewer horses than before. He spoke more often of soundness than victory. Astor had recovered completely from the tenderness in his near forefoot, but he would never race again. Nicholas had made that decision before the horse returned to full strength, when there was still time for hope to disguise ambition. Astor now exercised lightly across the estate and spent long afternoons in the south paddock. Marlowe's leg had healed sufficiently for comfortable movement. Though he had been retired from competition and given a quiet field near the orchard, Louisa visited both horses whenever she came to Kent. She did not come as mistress of Marden Park restored by public applause. She came when she chose. For 8 months, Nicholas courted his own wife with the formality he once would have mocked. He sent a card before every call at Templeton House. Sometimes Louisa received him. Sometimes she sent word that she was unavailable, and he left without asking whether the refusal concealed punishment. He wrote letters that did not demand answers. He described changes at the stables, asked her judgment on proposed appointments, and reported when her recommendations had been followed. He never enclosed apologies written to display his eloquence. The apologies had already been spoken. What remained was conduct. When Louisa answered, she did so because she wished to. They took carriage drives through Hyde Park, beneath the observation of society. Though neither treated public acceptance as proof of private repair, they attended 2 concerts together and left one supper early when Lady Catherine's former friends attempted to turn Louisa's vindication into fashionable entertainment. Nicholas did not make a cutting remark. He simply asked Louisa whether she wanted to go. When she said yes, they went. At Templeton House, he learned to sit through silences without filling them. at Marden Park, he asked before joining her in the stables. He never requested the diary. He never looked toward the escritoire where she kept it. The green morocco book remained hers, no longer hidden because secrecy was required, but protected because privacy was a right. On the first clear morning of spring, Louisa arrived at Marden Park before sunrise. She had sent notice the previous evening that she wished to see the new training arrangements. Nicholas met her in the stable yard wearing a dark riding coat and no expression of surprise. He had learned not to make her arrival into a reward for his patience. 2 horses waited beneath the covered passage. Louisa's grey mare stood nearest the mounting block. Nicholas's bay gelding waited several yards beyond, held by a groom. Asta watched from the open door of his loose box, bright-eyed and sound. The eastern sky had begun to pale above the roofs, turning the wet cobbles silver. Louisa wore the green diary in a leather saddlebag fastened behind her seat. Nicholas saw it when the groom brought the mare forward. His gaze rested on the bag for only a moment before returning to Louisa's face. "The lower track was inspected yesterday," he said. "Mr. Bell checked every plate this morning. We can take the orchard path instead if the ground feels too soft. The lower track will do. Would you like the groom to ride behind us?" "No," Nicholas nodded and dismissed both grooms. He did not approach the mare until Louisa had checked the girth herself. When she finished, he stood beside the mounting block and offered his hand. "May I?" Louisa looked at his open palm. Once, he had held her diary with the confidence of a man who believed marriage made permission unnecessary. Now even assistance was offered rather than assumed. She placed her gloved hand in his. Yes. His grip was steady as she stepped onto the block and settled into the saddle. He released her as soon as she was secure. Before he could turn toward his own horse, Louisa touched the flap of the saddlebag. "Nicholas," he stopped. "I wrote something this morning." Hope appeared in his face, quiet and unguarded. He did not look at the bag. "Would you like to hear it?" she asked. "Only if you wish to read it." Louisa opened the saddlebag and took out the green morocco diary. Dawn light touched the brass clasp. For a moment, she remembered candlelight, laughter, and the terrible exposure of hearing her private grief turned into public sport. Then she looked at the man waiting below her, not reaching for the book and not asking what the page contained. She opened it herself. The new entry required only 1 line. "Today he waited for my signal." Nicholas closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was no performance in his expression. "I will keep waiting," he said. "Not forever," Louisa replied. "Only when the choice belongs to me. Then I will know the difference." She closed the diary and returned it to the saddlebag. The clasp clicked softly. The sound no longer resembled a lock against danger. It sounded like a boundary honored. Nicholas stepped toward his bay, but Louisa leaned down before he could mount. He looked up. She placed one hand against his cheek and kissed him. The affection was hers to begin, warm and unhurried, given without audience or demand. Nicholas rested one hand lightly over hers and returned the kiss only after she remained close. When she drew back, he did not follow. "I love you," Louisa said. The words carried none of the old loneliness. They were not hidden on a page or offered in hope that he might someday notice. They were spoken because she trusted herself to survive whatever answer came. Nicholas held her gaze. "I love you too." He mounted his horse and guided the bay beside her grey. The lower track stretched ahead through the pale fields, bordered by new grass and bare branches, tipped with green. Nicholas gathered his reins but did not move. Louisa watched him wait. Then she gave the signal. They began at a walk, side by side. When the path widened, neither moved ahead. When it narrowed near the orchard wall, Nicholas looked to her before changing position, and Louisa nodded. Beyond the trees, Asta called from the stable yard. The sound followed them into the morning. Louisa felt the diary secure behind her, carried by her own choice, holding words that would never again be taken for applause. She touched her heel to the mare's side. Nicholas matched her pace. Together, they rode into the rising light, neither leading without asking, neither following without choosing.